not on camera, but Phyllis is on.
Okay, go.
Hello! Welcome to Northern Lights Spiritual Center, a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Northern Lights Spiritual Center offers spiritual and practical tools to make positive changes in our
lives.
Yay! Okay, my name is Reverend Vaughan Amaré, and I am going to be giving the sermon today, or giving the talk, and I am here at Northern Lights Spiritual Center with Reverend Michael Amaré, who is our technical maestro, and I am here also with Cheryl, and I'm here with Reba, and we have Stephanie Scranton just signing in to Zoom. We at Northern Lights Spiritual Center acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded ancestral lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Salish Coast peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. We seek to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting the truth. And Zoom has shut down again. And we're connecting to the computer audio. So please join me in our opening song in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy.
All right, guys, make sure your feet back down.
For all the world.
Great.
And there's quite enough peace
Beautiful
and quite enough
neck and elbows wide.
to
Remember,
walk
want a nice
through
wide
our
Find
every
that top piece, and then lower.
fear. For Spirit,
Big waist, just kicking up. Up.
sweet Spirit, is in this very room.
Get high and low. That's the 3, and you lower. We have 2 holding the top.
And I don't know what that was.
I don't either.
Beautiful picture. Wow.
Obviously the commercial for that.
Okay. This is the time when we set aside in the morning for a brief meditation to center ourselves, to relax. So I just invite everyone to try to find that nice, comfortable, sweet spot and to get as comfortable as possible. And in that, once you're comfortable, just take a nice, deep breath in and release it. And another deep breath in. And hold it. And release. Let's do that one more time. In. And release. And so while I play this music and you either can close your eyes or watch what's on the screen, just allow yourself to relax, to release all that has come before this very moment, anything and everything, so that you can be in the perfect, the present now, not worrying about 10 minutes ago and not worrying about an hour from now, but just in this beautiful moment, this sacred time and space that we share together. just remember that anytime you get anxious, upset, or just uneasy, you can always just look around you at nature and focus on the nature that's around you, as you saw in this video. And relax and allow yourself to just shed off those feelings of anxiousness, anger, upset. And so when you're comfortable and ready, you can move your toes and fingers and come back to the room. And open your eyes, and so it is. Our reading today is from Carl Jung in a writing of Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. After the illness, a fruitful period of work began for me. A good many of my principal works were written only then. The insight I had had, or the vision of the end of all things, gave me the courage to undertake new formulations. I no longer attempted to put across my own opinion, but surrendered myself to the current of my thoughts. Thus, one problem after the other revealed itself to me and took shape. Something else, too, came to me from my illness. I might formulate it as an affirmation of things as they are. An unconditional yes to that which is, without subjective protest. Acceptance of the conditions of existence as I see them and understand them. Acceptance of my own nature as I happen to be. At the beginning of the illness, I had the feeling that there was something wrong with my attitude, and that I was to some extent responsible for my mishap. But when one follows the path of individuation, when one lives one's own life, one must take mistakes into the bargain. Life would not be complete without them. There is no guarantee, not for a single moment, that we will not fall into error or stumble into deadly peril. We may think there is a sure road, but that would be the road of death. Then, nothing happens any longer. At any rate, not the right things. Anyone who takes the sure road is as good as dead. It was only after the illness that I understood how important it is to affirm one's own destiny. In this way, we forge an ego that does not break down when incomprehensible things happen. An ego that endures the truth, and that is capable of coping with the world and with fate. Then, to experience defeat is also to experience victory. Nothing is disturbed, neither inwardly nor outwardly. For one's own continuity has withstood the current of life and of time. But what can come to pass only when one does not meddle inquisitively with the workings of fate. And so it is.
So this month's chant again is, my soul is calling me to get out and roam. My soul is calling me to go back to home. My soul is calling me to leave where I hide. My soul is calling me from deep inside. Calling me, I will listen. Calling me, I will hear. Calling me, I will wrestle with life within so near. So, please join me as the tune becomes familiar, or just be sung to, whichever you would prefer. My soul is calling me to get out and roam. My soul is calling me to go back to home. My soul is calling me to leave where I hide. My soul is calling me to learn from deep inside. Calling me, I will listen. Calling me, I will hear. Calling me, I will wrestle with life within so near. Now it's you and yours. Your soul is calling you to get out and roam. Your soul is calling you to go back to home. Your soul is calling you to learn from deep inside. Your soul is calling you to leave where you hide. Sorry, switch those. Calling you, you will listen. Calling you, you will hear. Calling you, you will wrestle. Calling life within so near. Now it's us and we. Our soul is calling us to get out and roam. Our souls are calling us to go back to home. Our souls are calling us to leave where we hide. Our souls are calling us to learn from deep inside. Calling us, we will listen. Calling us, we will hear. Calling us, we will wrestle with life within so near. Now back to I. My soul is calling me to get out and roam. My soul is calling me to go back to home. My soul is calling me to leave where I hide. My soul is calling me to learn from deep inside. Now, calling me, I will listen. Calling thank you for singing along.
That's deep.
So, the talk title for today is Pain.
Oh, you want yourself?
Pardon?
You want
Oh. Yes.
yourself? Okay.
I always get a little bit confused now that we're
Yeah, that's easy.
online. So I will go back and say the talk title is Pain, Path to Suffering or Wisdom.
Oh.
Slowly but surely.
Surely the presence of God is in this place.
And surely something's wrong. I'll get this slowly but surely. Patience. Patience. I apologize for
Is the song an intro to the
talk.
talk?
Yes.
So it isn't something you can say, we'll do it afterwards.
I don't know. The internet thing is.
Okay, my patience has run out. This is a scene that I wanted us to see together from the movie Harriet. And in the scene, this is when Harriet sings to the enslaved people that are working in the fields. And so from out of the woods where she is, she sings to people to cue them that she has arrived. And Harriet Tubman got identified as Moses. And the enslavers didn't know Harriet's identity as a former enslaved woman. And in the scene, what you see is that she sings to the enslaved, and those who hear her respond by dropping their tools in the field and running after her. And as the scene goes on, you watch them running through the forest. You watch them being hunted. They are running on foot, and the enslavers are on horseback. The enslavers have dogs sniffing out the enslaved. And Harriet Tubman, Moses, in coordination with the Underground Railroad, gets these people through the woods. And the scene starts with them getting shoes, because to run through the woods, if anyone has ever tried it in bare feet, is not an easy thing. And yet the other piece that comes to mind is that they are doing their work barefoot. That the expectation is that they'll be fine. And they get trundled into a cart, which is horse-drawn. So finally the playing ground levels a little bit, because they who have run this far in shoes that aren't their own shoes, in shoes that have been bundled and carried by Moses to them, you know, and how easy or how hard is it to run or walk in shoes that are not our own shoes? I don't know about you, but I've definitely had an outcome from wearing the wrong size shoes. I was a regular at my podiatrist. He went through and he literally surgically took care of ingrown toenails on 8 of my 10 toes. And my big toes on each foot were revisits, probably like 4 or 5 times. She has to get them to Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, they have the opportunity to claim their names. And they have the opportunity to review a little bit of their stories. The one woman shows a branding that she received because I think she had pulled out the wrong dress for her enslaver. Another person tells the story of his marks of beating because he had the unmitigated gall to tell the enslaver his real name, the name that his family had given him. You know, the enslaver had referred to him as the N-word Tom. And he said, you know, my name is this. And he took a beating for that. I wanted us to set the thinking on the talk in context with this story, because we all have our stories of suffering. We all have our stories of pain. We all have our stories that we pull out and parade. We have stories of heroes. One of the things that's happening this month is it's Juneteenth. It's the story of all of the incidents in June that have risen up to celebrate Black history. And there isn't a particular date because history wasn't tracked. History was ignored. So many histories of heroes, and another thing that's come up this month is the language of sheroes. That even the name heroes contains within it he, as if he is the only one that can be heroic. So sheroes is a stance, a deliberate standing forward and saying there are women of courage. There are women who, like Harriet Tubman, changed the course of history, who changed the course of how the world flows. I'd also like to introduce the notion of theros, rather than just landing it on heroes, or that was the sad song that she called.
Right under the overseer's nose. Did you show?
No, not now. I mean, now that the internet has finally caught up with us, we're gonna be heroic, and we are going to just let our imaginations tell us the story, and we can send out the link to that so that you in your own homes can pull up that story and see it without any waiting. So you can celebrate the heroic, the we rose, that our own heroic, our own she-roic, our own they-roic, our we-roic ways of engaging with the world. So many stories are interesting because they are how people contend with the pain that presents itself in the world. Jonathan Lockwood Huey described that pain is what the world inflicts on us. Suffering is our emotional reaction when we fail to make the difficult choice to choose joy in response to pain. The reading that Reverend Michael shared with us was from Carl Jung. And Carl Jung spoke about his response to an illness. I mean, how many times do we let illness become our story? It's like this is now my little quick draw, my little Rolodex of how I introduce myself in the world. These are my diagnoses. These are my pains. One of the things is that pain can be a calling card because that is something that is absolutely universal. Sometimes we like to set ourselves adrift and imagine that we live in a heavenly state. I mean, that's what one of the teachings in Science of Mind is, that we are all living in heaven. Heaven is right here, right now. Okay, heaven is right here, right now, and coronavirus is killing how many people in India? Is it really heavenly in India, where we watch these people who can't even get to the hospital, where they are gasping for air because their lungs no longer work? It's one of the things that I found irritating about the teachings of Science of Mind, because it had this blind eye to the notion that pain actually happens. And that pain is a matter of our own personal choice. And I think it's incredibly, it does two things. One, it becomes a new version of blame. If you're experiencing pain, there's something absent in your consciousness. Your pain is an absence of recognizing the joy, the pleasure that's available in the world. But I think it's also a matter of religious supremacy, spiritual supremacy. My consciousness is so highly developed. I am so evolved that pain cannot touch me. The whole reason the Buddha went on the spiritual quest was because the Buddha had been shrouded from pain. His father had been forewarned. His father had been forewarned that you would either have a son who is a great earthly ruler, or your son will be a great spiritual leader. And the father was not particularly interested in having a spiritual leader. His father was like, heck no, we are not doing that spiritual leadership thing with my little baby boy. My little baby Siddhartha is not going to have that. Hating that's not going to happen. So Siddhartha was completely shrouded from pain and suffering. The enslavers of so many people were completely shrouded from the knowledge. One of the things that's going on now is there's a big reaction to the notion of critical race theory. It's like, we can't have that taught in our schools. We can't have little white children thinking that they've done anything wrong. We can, it's like this completely, they can't even understand what critical race theory is, so they have this huge reaction to it. Oh my God, critical race theory, you're critical of whites. And it's like, it isn't that, you dumb. If you had the intellectual curiosity, if you were willing to respond to pain through the avenue of wisdom rather than through the avenue of suffering.
It's muting.
Something amazingly powerful gets lost. A big thing that I want to talk about is that pain gives us a point of choice. Khalil Gibran said, "Much of your pain is the bitter potion by which the physician within you heals your sick self."
Wow.
Much of pain is the bitter potion by which the physician within heals your sick self. The second thing Khalil Gibran said is, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. In any story, the whole reason the story happens is that something is wrong. The story happens because the hero steps forward and says, I am going to contend with this. I am not going to let this situation stay the way it is. Now, you've heard me talk about the hero's story. You've heard me talk about the hero's story, that it is a journey. And the fact is, the reason that it's compelling, the reason that we watch these dramas, the reason that television is successful, the reason that the internet and gaming is successful is that there is something it keys into a key element of our brain. Our brain loves to find patterns. If our brain isn't looking for patterns, our brain has stopped working. So the brain is seeking out what is familiar and what is new. Piaget described it as there is accommodation. Oh, and I'm forgetting the other one because I didn't look this up for today's talk. But Piaget identified growth and development through a pathway of accommodation, which is adjusting things to the way we understand them, and then opening up, breaking out into something new. Piaget identified some basic ways that human beings respond to living in the world. Maybe accommodation and adjustment, and I will look for people that are really interested in it. But the notion is that development is, how do we take this in to the story that we know? Does it fit or not? If it fits, great. If it doesn't, then we have to break open our story. One of the Science of Mind teachings is that we know that we are perfect, whole, and complete. And when we find that that is not the circumstances in which we are, that is the experience of pain. It's like, wait a second, I'm not seeing the perfect, whole, and complete. Now, if we choose the path of suffering, then we just whine about it. Oh my God, it's supposed to be perfect, whole, and complete, and life is not looking perfect, whole, and complete. And I just hate that my life is not perfect, whole, and complete. God, life sucks. I am the victim of an evil life experience. For years, the notion is that if life is suffering, It's because God is unhappy with us. God is displeased. One of the things that I was hearing, and I'll get to a little bit later, but the notion of, do we really think that God takes us so personally that it's like looking at our path and trying to set up little bombs along our way? Do we really think that God is so nasty that that's how it works? I'm going to give life, but then I'm going to fill it up with all kinds of little nasties. Does that even make sense? There is this giving of life, and this giving of life is also this giving of crap. You know, I bestow upon you life, and now I bestow upon you this crap. Blessings. I mean, when I say it like that, doesn't that sound ridiculous? And yet we have entire faiths that are built on that. That God is putting crap out continuously. That a crappy world we live in is because God is a crappy creator. And that we would even question the crappiness of this creation. It's much more challenging to say there's some crap in the world because human beings are busy putting crap out into the world. We kind of recoil at the idea that we're responsible for some crap. We don't like that. I didn't do that. How can you look at me? Don't blame me. This crap is there. I didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, that's what's really reactive about this notion of critical race theory. I didn't do that. See, I'm white, but I had nothing to do with it. With those slave owners way back when. I mean, my grandfather didn't even get to the United States until like the mid-1900s. So how could he have anything to do with it? Oh, granted, my great-grandfather from Northern Ireland, from Northern Scotland, I mean, you know, the British were doing how many awful things all over the world. I mean, their whole mantra was, okay, we're going to go into places and now we're going to set it up so that we can have this whole internal strife so that they never think about going back against us because they hate each other so much. We're going to rile up that hate. That was their plan. We're going to find differences and then we're going to maximize the use of it. It's not really a nice plan. We can't have people working together. We have to have people fighting against each other. What do we have to build to do that? Oh, we've got different religions. Let's just make sure that those Muslims and those Hindus hate each other. There was nothing natural in the Hindu teachings, thou shalt hate a Muslim. I mean, is there anything in the Torah that says you will hate everybody else? You will hate a Muslim. The blessings upon you will multiply when you hate a Muslim. If you can find a Christian to hate them, you will be blessed that much more in heaven. I don't remember any Christian traditions that are really go out and find a Muslim and hate them. Find a Muslim and hate them. Find a Jew and hate them. Find a pagan and hate them. That's not really fundamental to some of the things that Jesus said. Jesus wasn't teaching lessons on hate. I mean, do you ever look up? Do people ever look to the compendium of Jesus's stories and say, "Where's the one on hate?" And yet, that's how it gets carried off in how many Christian churches. You know, the notion that women don't have rights over their own bodies. That isn't the Christian faith. That's white fragility. That's male fragility. Oh my God. The notion that the penis is something to be worshipped and the vagina is something to be recoiled from and treated as if it's some kind of dynamite. Yeah, it's dynamite because there's a power there. And it's a different kind of power. pain exists for a reason, and sometimes the reason is that our foremothers and our forefathers and the people before us misunderstood pain, and they created a whole drama about how pain is our gateway to heaven. If you suffer enough, you get into heaven. There's an old white guy that manages life after death, and he's pissed off. He is filled with grudges, and you've got to make him happy. Good luck with that. You know, if you really called it out for what it is, people will be like, oh, wait, I never thought about it that way. I'm trying to get into heaven with this guy who holds grudges. It's kind of like my grandfather. And I'm going to be eternally happy there? I'm going to be eternally happy in a place where grudges are carried? And we'll get to this. And the notion is, the second point of that, so first point, pain exists for a reason. We are built, we are constructed, we are designed with nerve endings. The nerve endings are there so that we know what's going on in the world around us. Babies cry because they're hungry or because they're wet or poopy. They don't like how they feel. And they let us know it. It's the abusive parents who mess them up and are like, you shouldn't be hungry or poopy or wet. And if you are, God forbid, there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't have a heart that has disease. You shouldn't have nerves that hurt. We are built with a nervous system, and it's to let us know that we need to change something. Pain can be a messenger. And do we decide to shoot the messenger? How many times have we heard that? You know, you get a message and you shoot the messenger rather than listen to what the messenger had to say. I mean, the Star Wars trilogy, you know, it isn't a trilogy. I don't know what nine. You know, it isn't a trilogy. There's 6 of them. There's 9 of them. Oh my gosh, we've lost everything now. I love our internet. So it's 9 stories of the same thing. I mean, Darth Vader, someone comes and tells him it didn't work out according to plan. You know, Lord Vader, I apologize. I mean, apologizing really isn't in your it does not benefit you. You know, and the grandson is the same way. You know, in case I'm sorry if I'm doing spoilers here, but Ren, who is Darth Vader's grandson, mother is Leia, father is Hans.
So
I mean, he hears something he doesn't like. Oh, he is like ha 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 ha.
Serious need of anger management.
Anger management is not anything that he ever learned. He did not spend a minute with Yoda, and he didn't really gather much from Luke, who was taught by Yoda. Don't go to the dark side. Problem with it, don't go to the dark side, is, you know, that neuro-linguistic program, which is like, oh, the dark side must be really interesting. There must be so much there that you're telling me not to do it. Follow the light. Follow the light. Follow the pain for the message that it has to share. Follow the pain for the message, for what there is to learn, for the wisdom that lies there. How we respond to pain is a choice. Do we use it as our calling card? Hi, my name is Vaughan. I have diabetes. I've had diabetes from the age of 7. I've been sick for a long time. Hey Vaughan, nice to meet you. Welcome. To what extent do we make pain our name? Do we make pain our identity? Do we make pain who and what we are and our suffering? Oh, I've got some great stories. I mean, you know, we know those folks. I can up you on that. You think COVID was bad for you? Isn't that what a lot of it is? You think it was bad for you to be bound home? What about all those mothers with those 9 children who are trying to compete with each other for internet? We who don't have internet here, think about those 9 children, all of whom are supposed to be online learning.
Oh my God.
And, I got popped out of class. I got popped out of class. Did you get popped out of class? Okay, I'm going to come back to class. I'm back in class. I'm back in class. Back in class. That child didn't stay in class very much. I wonder if they're really interested in learning. I don't know that they're not interested in learning as much as they got really crappy technology, which we're getting to see today.
Yes.
And is that going to be our story as a community? Northern Light Spiritual Center, the place where the internet works poorly. Welcome to the place where internet works poorly. That's our identity. Our mission to struggle through, our mission to boldly go where no one can go when their internet is bad. Suffering is optional. The pain is going to happen. The pain is, but how do we choose to engage with it? And it's one of the reasons that I so Jacob from the Old Testament, from the Torah. My Christian upbringing makes it the Old Testament. This was a not very nice guy. Jacob was he was not just really altogether pleasant. He was the younger twin. He was the one that was not appointed for greatness. If you were born number 2, it's like you were worth number 2. I mean, but Jacob's mother, for whatever reason, Rachel really preferred Jacob. Esau, she's kind of like, I mean, she collaborated with him. She was like, okay, your father's going to bless him, your father's blind, so if we put this goat skin on your arms, your father won't tell the difference. How sad is it that the other piece there that we don't ever talk about it, how sad is it that you can put freaking goat skin on the younger son and he's going to think it's the same as the older son? Did he really ever touch the older son to know? You ever ask that question? How familiar was Jacob with either one of his sons that he could be fooled by that? And the problem with that is I'm kind of making Esau into a victim. And we all love that story. Turn the story around a little bit. Jacob ran away. Jacob didn't stand his ground. That's one of the things about the characters in the Torah. These were people that were flawed. These were people that made mistakes. But don't we make mistakes? So the whole point is that we can see ourselves in them. Who among us is perfect? Who among us has done everything right all the time? Never straying from that line of values and morality that we say, this is how I will do it, always. Don't we find ourselves falling off of that path? And how many times do we respond with the emotional energy of shame? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, don't let anybody, I can't let anybody know that. When I got into the field of psychology, developmental psychology, one of my professors was exploring the distinctions between shame and guilt. And being raised Catholic, there's a certain value in shame and guilt. There was a certain appeal because it was drawn from quite a lot. I mean, there are classic stories about the Jewish mother. Do you love me enough, but you didn't do this? You know, there's always the, you didn't do enough. That kind of punchline. Catholic mothers come in a close second to that Jewish mother, guilt-inducing, shame-inducing, oh, you're not good enough. I mean, I remember, very early in my vocabulary, when I was getting my insulin shots, and the pain would happen on my body, and it was pretty easy because it was just once a day when I was little, and once a day when you're little was like huge.
Sure.
Because, kids are like, oh, I want to go to the doctor so I can get a shot. Oh, can you please take me in for that blood draw? I love it when I get my blood drawn. I love that feeling when the needle goes in and they dig around and they finally find the place where the blood can come out. How many people love that? I mean, you might be able to count it. I'm trying to think what you could count it with. I don't think you really have a big checklist of people that love that feeling of a shot or love having a needle put in for a blood draw. It's not a vast, huge number. I say this because when I was getting my shot, what I learned from my grandmother was offer this suffering up to God. Like God is a collection basket where he's keeping track that I've offered these sufferings. Oh, I'm going to go so far into heaven because I've been given a lot of suffering over to God. God is going to be so happy with this. I mean, when I look back, it's kind of a little bit ridiculous. I offered this suffering up to God. Really? God is up there really like reveling in my suffering? What does it tell us about God? It doesn't tell us anything about God. It tells us about our misunderstanding about how the divine works. And we've had so many misconceptions about how the divine works. The divine is angry. The divine loves suffering. The divine, fills the world with crap and fills it with temptation because the divine really loves to have us messed over. There's a phrase, what you see is what you see with. So the God that we see is our own sense. It's what we're looking for, how we're seeing God. And that brings us to the third notion, that we can choose whether we're going to suffer. The pain is going to come, but how do we respond to it? Do we respond to it with a sense of, oh my gosh, it's got a message for me? Maybe there's wisdom here. Do we look for the pony, or do we just hang out in the poop? I mean, there's a bunch of people that love to throw poop on the wall in Washington D.C. It's like they thought it was cool. Really, they thought it was cool, and they were like normal tourists. Do normal tourists really take their poop and rub it on things? I don't think so. I think we'd have a hard time, gathering people together. A collection of 1,000 people. How many people think it's normal to take your poop and rub it on things? I don't think we'd have a lot of people say, yes, that's very normal. It's common. In fact, it's not only normal, it's common. And praise them for doing that. What a sign of maturity and intelligence. What a sign that they were so angry that they could do the most, really most immature thing that they could possibly think of, that they could possibly engage in. So the third thing is, okay, pain comes to us for a reason. We get to choose. We get to respond. Do we use pain as a point to expand our knowledge and our understanding, our ability to engage the world, or do we use pain as another calling card for how great we are at suffering? Oh my gosh, my expertise with suffering is fabulous. My list of suffering is so much bigger than yours. And shouldn't I get some kind of cap? If I can outdo you on the amount that I suffer, shouldn't you bow down before me? It's like, screw that, right? What I want to propose for the third point is that forgiveness is the spiritual practice, is the tool, is the pathway to respond to what we know about pain and suffering. Now, we've all heard the notion that, forgiveness isn't for the person that we're forgiving. Forgiveness is for us. In the same way that I'm asking us to let go of our calling card of suffering, the whole notion of the stories about all of those injustices, there's a notion that I learned on Criminal Minds. There's an injustice collector. He finds someone, and it's usually a he, because most crimes are actually done by he's. And they look for things that piss them off, and then they kill or they punish or they do something against that. So that notion of that, and it's a pattern. They call it an injustice collector. But the fact is that aren't all of us to a little bit injustice collectors? Don't we have our collection of people that have injusticed us?
Right.
Those who have crossed our lines and we're like, you are not getting close again because you are bad. I heard this notion that there's a distinction between partial forgiveness and true forgiveness. And the partial forgiveness, not surprisingly, is I forgive you. It's all okay. And the thing about partial forgiveness is I'm doing it because I'm showing how superior I am. You hurt me, but I've gotten over it, and I forgive you. So I'm granting you a pardon. Aren't I big? Aren't I grand? I've pardoned you. And you can tell from the way I'm saying it that it's really, you're just a miserable. The person who does that is just miserable. It's just, you really want to be in the presence of that kind of person. I've granted you a pardon. Aren't I fabulous? Line up so that I can pardon you, and pardon you, and pardon you. Because I am the benevolent pardoner. So it's really just a way of reinforcing our own ego about how great we are, and about how wonderful we are, and about how blessed we are. I've forgiven so many people. God loves me for that. True forgiveness, and I was shocked when I heard this, but it's like, ugh, and I hate hearing that, because how many of us have said the whole notion of you can forgive but don't forget? We shouldn't forget. We're like, but forgive and forget. The notion about forgiveness is it's a modification of the notion about, because it's just stupid to forget entirely. It's like, do you really, the Native Americans, one of the reasons that the indigenous people ended up suffering over and over and over again is that, it's like we won't do it again until we do it again. And then we've done it again. And now we've done it again. But if you take this treaty the way we have adjusted it, the treaty is you'll have all this land. And then the treaty is we bought this land, so now you can't have any of it. The treaty is you can have all your fish except for the fish that we want. You can have rights to the fish, but you can't go out on the water because the water belongs to me. So we're wary about that notion of forgiving and forgetting. But the problem with our continual remembering is that it's like we are keeping, so we've been stabbed in the gut. But rather than removing the knife from our gut, we are going to keep it there, and we are going to build in some kind of special place so that we always have the knife available to show that person what they've done to us. Look at this, I'm still carrying this wound. I'm still carrying the weapon that you used against me. We don't think about the stories like that. We don't think about our remembering as if we would keep a knife in our gut. That's just stupid. Nobody says, I'm going to keep this knife in my gut forever. Now you keep the knife in until you get to a place where they can take care of it and the amount of bleeding won't be enough that you bleed out. But you don't make it a permanent fixture. We've talked about it a lot. That, lo, thou I walk through the valley of darkness. We've talked about not building a condo in the valley of darkness. We've talked about not building a home in the valley of darkness. But the notion of forgiveness is, I'm going to forgive, but I'm going to remember what a bastard you are. Because if I ever forget what a bastard you are, then I'm going to let myself get hurt again. I'm going to hold on to this nasty, ugly story for the rest of my life. Really, who does that hurt? We all know the notion of forgiving others isn't for others, but it's for ourselves. I mean, one of the things I was listening to about forgiveness is, so often the people who have harmed us weren't even thinking about us. It's not like they ever sit out like, I am going to do this so that I can hurt Vaughan. Vaughan will be the victim of my suffering and my life will be complete. Really, there are so few people that ever think that way. It's like they just can't imagine that the impact of their actions, they just can't see where the impact is. They just don't get it. I've talked before about the big aha that I gained in racial equity work. It's being able to own the impact of my actions, not just cling to the intent of my actions. Well, I never meant to hurt you. The fact that I didn't know that you have a black son doesn't mean that when I use the N-word, I meant anything about him. So I never meant to be offensive to you. So I'm just going to use that word because I like using it. I like the way it sounds. The choice about forgiveness is also being able to witness and to stand up for truth and to be able to say, let's recognize the impact, not just the intent. And how do we use that to guide our own thinking? How do we use that to guide our own actions? How do we let ourselves off the hook and still take responsibility? Maybe there are people with whom we want to continue a relationship. You can't just say, okay, if somebody is a serial multiple affair person, the person that's in a relationship with that multiple affair person has to determine, do I need at some point to say, stop it? Do I need at some point to be able to say, I can't live like that. I can't live in that space of distrust. Michael and I were watching a show about Lucille Ball. And I had, I was little, I didn't really understand. I didn't realize that how much Desi Arnaz, who was married to her, would regularly have relationships with prostitutes. And he would joke about it with his friends. And she was like, it finally got too much. And she finally said, I just can't live like this. And she divorced him, but she never stopped loving him. On his deathbed, one of the last things that their daughter heard her father and her mother say to each other is, I love you. They still had that love, even though Lucille Ball was like, I just can't live with you frolicking around. So she drew her line. She said, this is where it can be. And when his drinking interfered with his ability to let his brilliance shine, she never claimed he was stupid, or she never went down the path that others said, well, he's just not very good. She always defended him. He is brilliant. The whole reason that we've got this thing is that he had a vision. He had a capacity. So in the example of Lucille Ball, it seems pretty clear to me that she forgave the harms that he did, and she could continue to hold on to the beauty that he contributed. One of the things about that show yesterday that Michael and I watched is that Lucille Ball was really a shero. She was somebody that was so ahead of her time. She was willing to get all mucked up. She was willing to be the every woman that made mistakes. I mean, these were little mistakes. They were big and messy mistakes. You know, how many of us can see the picture of the chocolate factory? You know, the chocolates are whizzing by, and she and Ethel are putting the chocolates down their shirt. They're packing them in their hat, they're talking out of their mouth. I mean, this was not like a pretty scene. This wasn't like a film where you look at the mise en scène of the picture and you're like, oh, isn't each and every image of Lucille Ball beautiful here? You know, when she's stamping around in the grapes and she's getting down in the grapes, she was unafraid to get dirty. She was unafraid to be seen making mistakes. She was unafraid and unapologetic about that. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we have to become apologetic. Forgiveness doesn't mean that we have to have someone else apologize to us. Forgiveness is about us disconnecting from the suffering of that story. It's being able to say, I am not going to hold on to this story anymore. Forgiveness is about offering ourselves freedom that we can have without retelling that story. For a long time, I told stories about my ex-wife because I needed other people's sympathy. But the fact of the matter was that I chose to be with Elisa because Elisa was somebody who could very clearly state what she liked and didn't like. I mean, Michael and I were like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. I don't know. Let's not. I mean, Elisa was never indecisive. So one of the things that Elisa taught me, one of the gifts that she gave me is make a goddamn decision. Get up off your butt and do something. Make a choice. I mean, that's like my dad. He's like, it's like you're trying to get somewhere to say something, but can you finally just say it? You know, I mean, what that has given me is, like when I see a very clear conclusion when I'm working with a child, that I do far better to just say what the conclusion is rather than wrap it up in like, well, you know, it could be said that your child has this thing that's going on, and, you know, it's a hard thing to say, so I'm not going to say it. Parents are actually relieved when you finally say, you know, the fact that your child is 9 years old and they can't write anything, the fact that your child is still struggling with getting themselves to the bathroom, there's a word for that, and it's an intellectual disability. And parents don't go like, oh my God, you said that terrible thing. They're like, oh, there's a name for what we're experiencing. There's a name for what's going on. There's just such a huge sense of relief. It's like when you get a diagnosis. Isn't it a relief to get a gosh darn diagnosis rather than like the doctor's like, well, I don't know, it could be this or it could be that. It's like, what do you think it is? Isn't there just a greater sense of peace that comes with it? forgiveness lets us unburden ourselves. Forgiveness also lets us pass through that pain into getting back to the appreciation. Elisa can be a remarkably decisive person. And how do I use that? How do I let that be a lesson to me? Rather than, well, she knew what she wanted and she went for it, and I was the victim of her going for what she wanted. Wah, wah, wah. Another victim story. It doesn't make me dear or lovely. It makes me a schmuck. It makes me a kind of like, running around like this. It's like, how often are we going to just hear this loser story from this guy? And it's like, he's got our sympathy already. Do we have to keep hearing it? You know those people. Do they build our energy or do they suck our energy? Cheryl, I have to tell you one more thing. One more thing, and I didn't tell you this before. It's like, Reverend Pamela used to talk about the hand. It's like you decide when the hand is going to go up. I'm not listening to that. Reverend Pamela put together a whole new musical group with which she performs because the hand went up. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to listen to these elements. We make music together and that's great, but there's this soul-sucking thing that's happening. There's this continuous bias. There's this continuing, like, you're a special black person, but you're not like all of the other black people. And I'm going to continue to have my prejudice about other black people, and I'm going to continue speaking it, and it might be offensive and we'll laugh it off. And it's like, no, I don't want to listen to that anymore. I'm going to draw the line. That's not even about forgiveness. It's just recognizing, where is it that I can no longer abide? Where is it that we respect ourselves enough? So, 3 points. 1, we have pain for a
Reason.
bing, 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 bing. Number 2, suffering is ding, 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 ding. And forgiveness gives us
Peace.
ease, peace, freedom.
Freedom.
Forgiveness is not us bestowing our grace upon them. I forgive you because I'm such a big, holy, perfect person. When people act like that, it's like, F that. Frack you. I don't want you to even think you've forgiven me. Because you're now like in this whole moral superiority position to me. How fun is it to be around morally superior people? If you can count on your hands, how many people do you look for that are morally superior? Are you going to raise any fingers for people that you want to hang with that are morally superior?
Maybe one.
Really?
One finger.
That's a gesture. It's not a point of counting. It's a gesture of disregard rather than a gesture of embracing. I mean, literally, think about it. How many fingers can you raise on your hand that you legitimately think, I love this morally superior person, and their presence, their forgiving presence just fills me with love and wholeness. That's that half forgiveness. That's that faux. Actually, I want to use the word faux forgiveness. I've forgiven you, and I've forgiven you, but I'm not going to forgive them. But I get for this too. Forgiveness gives us freedom. Forgiveness is not about what that other person experienced. So, I have an affirmation for us. And we'll do it 4 times. I'll say it first so you know what it is, and then I'll break it into little pieces so that it's bite-sized and chewable. I let pain speak its wisdom to me. I let pain speak its wisdom to me, and then let myself reclaim the wholeness it offers. And then let myself reclaim the wholeness it offers. So, I let wisdom or I let pain speak its wisdom to me, and then let myself reclaim the wholeness it offers. I let pain speak its wisdom to me, and then let myself reclaim the wholeness it offers. And one last time. I let pain speak its wisdom to me, and then let myself reclaim the wholeness it offers.
The wholeness it offers.
And so it is.
So it is.
And maybe Michael can use that as a affirmation
Tomorrow?
tomorrow
Affirmation?
on your affirmationings. Okay. Go for it on this second week. It's doing this on my weeks. I'll notice.
Yes, I know. I apologize that we lost everybody on Zoom, except ourselves here. And I want to thank Reverend Vaughan for his, felt like a comedy thing thrown in, which sometimes makes, you have to have laughter in your life. I mean, that's, laughter is, to me, is a healing presence. If you can't laugh at certain things, then, you know, it's kind of sad. But I want to thank all those on Facebook who joined, who shifted from Zoom to Facebook, and we will be here next week. Next week, Reverend Pamela will be here speaking. She speaks on the third Sunday of every month. And I just want to give thanks for everyone who's ever tuned in, who's ever supported in any way, shape, or form to Northern Lights Spiritual Center. Because without you, we would not be here. Your support, whether it's financial, whether it's just supporting spiritually or emotionally, I give thanks for that. Because that is how we can have this sacred ground that we call Northern Lights Spiritual Center. And so I give thanks for that, and so it is.
So it is.
Oh.
Yes, I know.